Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Today we're reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 17. The Lord travels to Vrindavan, texts 211 through the end of the chapter. Sukha mukhe shunhitave Krishna ravananana sarika padaikave rarika vanana.
This is the 211?
211. After hearing this description of Lord Krishna from the male parrot, the female parrot began to recite a description of Srimati Radharani. In our storyline, Lord Chaitanya has traveled to Vrindavan. You remember the last few weeks we read about his going to the Janmastan, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, where Krishna appeared in the prison house of Kamsa at the Keshava temple, and danced and chanted, and then met the Sanodiya Brahmin, went to his home, who was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, and took prasadam with him, and we read some extensive pastimes that they had there and descriptions of why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him, because he had been accepted by Madhavendra Puri. And then there was a brief description of how this Brahmin must have lived pretty close to the Janmastan, because he was there at the Kirtan, and then they went to his house, and then it's described that Lord Chaitanya went to the different ghats along the banks of the Jamuna and bathed in those different places. Then he went to, that was Vishram Ghat. Okay, there you go. Haribol. Dirga Vishnu, Gokarna, Mahavidya. These are all places along the banks of the Jamuna. Now, what happened was, and then it described he started to travel to the different forests of Vrindavan, some on the eastern banks and some on the western banks of the Jamuna River. And then finally, these descriptions that we just started last week are of Lord Chaitanya's entering into a deeper mood of Vrindavan. It's just briefly described, but we'll cover it. This is the verse from Govinda Lilamrita, the female parrot. Shri Radhika Priyatha Surupata Sushilatanyatana Gana Chaturi Gunali Sampat Kavita Charajate Jagan Mano Mohana Chita Mohani. The female parrot said, Srimati Radharani's affection, her exquisite beauty and good behavior, her artistic dancing and chanting, and her poetic compositions are all so attractive that they attract the mind of Krishna, who attracts the mind of everyone in the universe. Text 213. Pona sukha kahe Krishna madana mohana tabeyara shloka sukha karila patana. Thereafter the male parrot said, Krishna is the enchanter of the mind of Cupid. Then he began to recite another verse, also from Govinda Lilamrita. Vamsidhari jagannari chitahari sasarike vihari gopanavir jivan hadhana mohana. The parrot said, my dear Sari, or female parrot, Sri Krishna carries a flute and enchants the hearts of all women throughout the universe. He is especially the enjoyer of the gopis, and he is the enchanter of Cupid also. Let him be glorified. From the Govinda Lilamrita 1331. Govinda Lilamrita is also a book by the same author, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And this 13th chapter is a description of Vrindavan. It's a description of the different forests. There are different forests which display the seasons all the time of the year. So you can walk from the summer season to the winter season by going from one forest to another. And as the Sakis and Sakas were performing pastimes with Radha and Krishna, and they would go to these various forests, these parrots came and started to sing the glories of one or the other. And it got into a kind of a battle. The female parrots recite glories of Srimati Radharani, and the male parrots respond by glorifying Krishna. And in this way they have kind of a battle of who's the best, who's the owner of this forest, who's the Vrindavaneshwari, is she the forest Isvari, or is Krishna who's the Isvara of everything, the champion. So this is, Lord Chaitanya is hearing these, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is using this literary technique to just give a peek into the mood of Lord Chaitanya as he's traveling through these forests. Text 215. Punasari kahe sukha kari parihasa tahan suni prabhura haila vismaya premolasa. Then the female parrot began to speak jokingly to Sukha, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was struck with wonderful ecstatic love to hear her speak. Radha Sange Hadabati Hada Madana Mohana Anyata Vishwa Mohapi Swayam Hadana Mohita. The parrot Sari said, when Lord Sri Krishna is with Radharani, he is the enchanter of Cupid. Otherwise, when he is alone, he himself is enchanted by the erotic feelings, even though he enchants the whole universe. From Govinda Lilamrita 13:32. Sukha Sari Udi Puna Kela Vrikshadhale Mayurera Nitya Prabhu Deke Kutuhale. Both parrots then flew into a tree, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to watch their the dancing of peacocks with curiosity. Mayurera Kanta Deha Prabhura Krishna Smriti Haila Premavase Mahaprabhu Bhumite Padhila. When the Lord saw the bluish necks of the peacocks, his remembrance of Krishna immediately awakened, and he fell to the ground in ecstatic love. Pabure murchita dekhi seta brahmana bhattacharya sangekare prabhura santapana. When the Brahmin saw that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was unconscious, he and Balabhadra Bhattacharya took care of him. Aste vyaste mahaprabhura lana bahirvasa jala seka kare ange vasterera bhatlasa. They hastily sprinkled water over the Lord's body. Then they took his cloth and began to fan him with it. Prabhu kane Krishna nam kahe uchakari Chaitanya pana Prabhu yana paragadi. They then began to chant the holy name of Krishna into the Lord's ear. When the Lord regained consciousness, he began rolling on the ground. Kanta kadu gramavane anga chata haila bhattacharya kolekari prabhura sushta. When the Lord rolled on the ground, sharp thorns injured his body. Taking him upon his lap, Balabhadra Bhattacharya pacified him. Krishna Veshi Prabhura Prema Gangara Ramana Bolabo Kari Uti Karena Nartana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind wandered in ecstatic love of Krishna. He immediately stood up and said, chant, chant. Then he himself began to dance. Bhattacharya Sevi Pra Krishna Nama Gaya Nachite Nachite Pate Prabhu Chaliyaya. Being thus ordered by the Lord, both Balabhadra Bhattacharya and the Brahmin began to chant the holy name of Krishna. Then the Lord, dancing and dancing, proceeded along the path. Prabhura prema veshe dekhi brahmana vismita, Prabhura rakshalagi viprahaila chintita. The Brahmin was astounded to see the ecstatic symptoms of love exhibited by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He then became anxious to give the Lord protection. Nila chale chila yaiche prema veshe mana, Vrindavana yate pate haila sata guna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was absorbed in ecstatic love at Jagannath Puri. But when he passed along the road on the way to Vrindavan, that love increased 100 times. Sahasra guna prema bhade matura darshane, laksha guna prema bhade brahmera bhadevane. The Lord's ecstatic love increased 1,000 times when he visited Vrindavan, or when he visited Mathura. But it increased 100,000 times when he wandered these forests of Vrindavan. Anya deshe prema uchale Vrindavane name, sakshat brahmanye eba se Vrindavane, prema gara gara mane rati divase, snana vakshi sari nirvaha karena abhyase. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was elsewhere, the very name of Vrindavan was sufficient to increase his ecstatic love. Now, when he was actually traveling in the Vrindavan forest, his mind was absorbed in great ecstatic love, day and night. He ate and bathed simply out of habit. Emata prema yavat pramila bharavana, ekatra likhirum sarvatra nayaya vanana. Thus I have written a description of the ecstatic love of Lord Chaitanya, the Lord Chaitanya manifested while he walked through the 12 forests of Vrindavan. To describe it all would be impossible. Vrindavana haile prabhora yakita premera vikara, koti grante ananta likhena tahara vistara. Lord Ananta writes millions of books elaborately describing the transformations of ecstatic love experienced by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Vrindavan. Tabo liki bhare nare tare ekakana, udesha karite kare dig darashana. Since Lord Ananta himself cannot describe even a fragment of these pastimes, I am simply pointing out the direction. Jagat Bashila Chaitanya Lilara Patare, Yanrayata Shakti Tata Patare Santare. The whole world became merged in the inundation of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One can swim in that water to the extent that he has the strength. Sri Rupa Raghunatha Padeyare As, Chaitanya Charitamrita Kahe Krishna Das. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 17th chapter, describing the Lord's traveling to Vrindavan. Amagana Timirandasya Gyanandana Sharakaya Chakshurun Melitam Gyena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. The Lord, when he manifests, not only does so for others. It's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila chapter 4, the internal desires and what's called the external desires of the Lord's advent. The internal desires. In other words, he's a person and he has desires and he wants to do something. He wants to experience love. That's his topmost internal desire. It's amazing that we understand the internal foremost desire of God. He's a person, and we're hearing about his desires. So he comes and he experiences love. with his devotees and even within himself. Here he is in Vrindavan, remembering the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, and he himself is entering into a state of consciousness that even Lord Anantadev, with his millions of hoods, writing every single day for millions of years, can't describe fully, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unlimited. But by hearing from liberated souls who have been empowered by the Lord to share his feelings with us, conditioned souls, we can get a peek and gradually better understand who he is and what our relationship with him is and what that transcendental realm and experience there is. When Lord Chaitanya was speaking with Sanatana Goswami, and also we see in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami, describing the characteristics of devotional service, there are 5 different activities which nurture our hearts in this realm of developing love. Easy verses to remember. Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vasa Srimurtira, Shradhaya Sevan. Sadhu Sangha means association with devotees. Nama Kirtan means chanting Hare Krishna. Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Mathura Vasa, residing in Mathura. And Srimurtira Shradhaya Sevana, worshipping the deity with faith and veneration. I was thinking that an analogy, is like we've all seen since we were kids, this food chart. Sometimes it's like a pie and they break it up into different divisions, or sometimes a triangle, and you see the different types of foods, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals. So if you want a healthy diet, then you have to include all these different features so that your body gets the specific nutrients that it needs to grow and be healthy. And if you have a particular need, like in rehab, then you might be given a specific diet so that something specific in your body will grow better, like a bone or muscle tissue or blood. Everybody knows you need iron for good blood, so you might take a supplement or different types of food so that that particular element in your body will grow. So here, in this pastime of Lord Chaitanya traveling to Vrindavan, he's providing us nutrients for Mathura Base, the holy dham. Residing in the holy dham acts like a nutrient for the growth of the spiritual body. I think anybody who's been to a holy dham has experienced this. So I want to kind of go down that path and describe this science, just like if you were to take a food group, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, then there are different lists of different foods in each of those categories. There's different lists that combine them. There's different ways that it describes what happens when you take those. They even get down to genetically modified food. They get down to the genes in the food to try and understand how it's acting. So that's why it's unlimited. The pastimes of the Lord. It's described that Lord Anantadev has been describing these things since time immemorial with millions of mouths and can't come to the end, because that's the nature of spirit. It's unlimited. It's always changing. There's always more. So this is just a brief description. And it comes from the spiritual world. Otherwise, we can't access that dimension. Atasi Krishna namadi nabhaved grayam indrai means that the material senses, which are our instruments for gaining knowledge, can't extend that far. They can't
perceive it. Just like right now, there's radio waves, television waves, telephone waves all around us. We don't experience them. You have to have the instrument. Then you can maybe see it or hear it or use it, come in contact with it. Infrared, all these different things. So, at the beginning of creation, when he was all by himself, Lord Brahma sat and performed tapasya and meditation and pleased the Lord. By that reciprocation, Krishna revealed to Brahma what's going on outside the universe. That's why he could chant, Chintamani Pakaro Sadmusho Kalpa Vriksha. He saw it. But before that, in the Brahma Samhita, he describes a bit about this Dham and what it is. In chapter 2, text 2, he describes the spiritual plane of Krishna's pastimes. Sahasapata Kamalam Gokulakyam Mahatpadam Tad Karnikaram Tad Dhamma Tad Anantam Sasambhavam. The spiritual place of transcendental pastimes of Krishna is portrayed in this verse. The super excellent station of Krishna, which is known as Gokul, has thousands of petals and a corolla like that of a lotus sprouted from a part of his infinitary aspect. The whirl of the leaves being the actual abode of Krishna. Purport. Gokula, like Goloka, is not a created mundane plane. Unbounded character forms the display of his unlimited potency and his propagating manifestation. Baladev is the mainstay of that energy. The transcendental entity Baladev has two aspects: infinite spiritual manifestation and infinite accommodating space for insentient gross things. The uni-quadrantal delineation of material universe will be dealt with in the proper place. The tri-quadrantal extensions of the transcendental infinitary field of the almighty, unlamenting, non-perishing, and non-apprehending unlimited situations of halo, which are fully spiritual, majestic foliation. Basically, that's the cover of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. That big lotus flower with Radha and Krishna inside it. Outside of that, the Paravyoma, the spiritual sky. In each of those Vaikuntha planets, a predominating deity. And then like a cloud off in the sky, there's the material universe, the material manifestation, the Mahatattva. And within each, and then there's Mahavishnu who breathes out, and the seed-like universes come. Within each universe, there's a Garbhodakshaya Vishnu that sprouts the lotus, where Brahma is born on top. And then on the top of that lotus, there's also Kshirodakshaya Vishnu in the milk ocean, and then he expands to become in every atom and in every heart of all the living entities. So, the spiritual sky of Goloka Vrindavan, which is 3/4 tri-quadrantal, he's talking about how that 3/4 dimension manifests inside the uniquadrantal, inside the 1/4. How can 3/4 of something fit in 1/4 of something? By our limited linear conceptions, it can't. It's not possible. But what's being described is a spiritual power, a spiritual dimension. The very majestical extension portrays the manifested lofty rich feature of a vaster unlimited region or greater atmosphere, which has its resplendent location wholly beyond the realm of mundane nature, on the further shore of the Viraja, surrounded by a halo of Brahman, or indistinguishable entity. This majestical power of the unlimited spirit emanates on the upper portion of the luminous sphere into the most charming Gokul, or eternally existing Goloka, exceedingly beautified by the assorted display of effulgence, Some designate this region as the abode of the Supreme Narayan, or the original fountainhead. Hence, Gokul, which is identical with Goloka, is the supreme plane. The same sphere shines as Goloka and Gokul, respectively, by its upper, or transcendental, and lower, or mundane, situation. So the nomenclature changes according to the location of the Dham. In the spiritualist guide, it's called Goloka. When that same dimension manifests by Krishna's Yogamaya potency in the material world, it's called Gokula. And that's where Krishna came and performed his pastimes. And coming in contact with those pastimes, living in those pastimes, we see that every one of the residents of Gokul, Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, all the cowherd boys, all the cowherd girls, all the mothers, all the cows, as we just read here, all the trees, all the land, everything was surcharged. And as Krishna performed his Leela and grew from his childhood, when he was brought by Vasudeva to the home of Nanda and left in the bed, from that very morning when everyone woke up, until 11 and a half years later when Akrura came. Just imagine how that love continued to grow and flow as these pastimes were performed. Then he left and went to Mathura, performed pastimes there until he was 28. Then Dwarka, and performed pastimes there for until he was 125. And it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Simultaneous to all these pastimes, of course, everybody knows the bit of the pastimes of the Mahabharata. And what happens is that simultaneous to Krishna winding up his pastimes in Dwarka with the Vishnu dynasty and their battle amongst themselves, the Pandavas, Dhritarashtra leaves home, Vidura came back from the palace after he had lost his 100 sons and told them, get out, you should go to the forest. So Dhritarashtra, he left, Vidura left, Kunti left, Queen Kandhari left, all the different sons had died. So finally, the Pandavas, or Yudhisthira was reigning as emperor, and they were deciding to leave. And it's described in chapter 15, text 39, Mathurayam tata vrajram surasena patim tata parjapatyam nirupetstyam agnan avipad isparaha. Yudhisthira then posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha and grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura as the king of Surasena. Afterwards, Maharaj Yudhisthira performed a Prajapatya sacrifice and placed himself in the fire of quitting household life. So he put Maharaj Parikshit on the throne of Hastinapur and Krishna's great-grandson, Vajranabh, as the king of Mathura. Who remembers the first son of Krishna and Rukmini? Who? Pradyumna. And you might remember that very shortly after Pradyumna's birth, he was kidnapped. Can you imagine? Like Krishna's son from the maternity ward, the Sambara demon, had indications that this Pradyumna would be the cause of his death. He got an omen, just like Kamsa and Krishna. So he took the form of a woman, and he came into the maternity ward and kidnapped the child, baby Pradyumna, and threw him in the ocean. Everybody remembers the story, and then the fish and the Mayavati, his wife and everything. So, this Pradyumna, he married amongst not only Mayavati, who was Cupid's wife in his past life, but he also married Rukmi, Rukmi's daughter, his mother's brother's daughter. So his cousin on the maternal side was Rukmavati. Pradyumna and Rukmavati married. They had a child named Aniruddha. Aniruddha is also his pastime, is mentioned in the Krishna book, Srimad Bhagavatam. Banasura had a daughter named Usha, and Usha had never had any relationship with a man before. She was a young girl. But one night when she was, 12, 13, coming into puberty, she had a dream of this beautiful boy while she was dreaming. And her friends the next morning could tell something's up with Usha. And her friend Chitralekha was a mystic yogi, and she asked, what happened? It looks like you've had some kind of erotic experience, but you've never been with a man. And she told him, I had this dream of this beautiful boy. And Chitralekha was a mystic yogi, and she could see everybody in the universe. So she said, I'll draw, and when I come up with the right person, then you tell me it's him. And she drew a picture of Krishna. And she was a little hesitant. Then she drew a picture of Pradyumna. Now, when Pradyumna was stolen, it was described, we read the pastime the other day, when he came back to the palace, to Rukmini's chamber, everybody thought it was Krishna. He looked so much like Krishna, but then there was slight difference. So Usha saw this picture of Pradyumna, and she blushed a little bit, and then Chitralekha drew the picture of Aniruddha, and she said, yes, this is him. And by her mystic potency, she went, and by a yoga maya yogic power, she brought Aniruddha to the palace of Banasura to be with Usha. And in a short time, Usha showed signs of pregnancy. That is Vajranabh, the great-grandson of Krishna, who, when he grew up, is placed by Yudhisthira as the king of Mathura. Now, what he did was he went throughout Braj. He's king, so he had so much facility. And he excavated kunds, and he established tirthas and temples, established the deity of Govinda, Madan Mohan, Gopinath, Vrindadevi, Srinathji, so many different, hundreds of deities around the Braj area. It's described that Krishna's pastimes, there's 84 square miles throughout the Braj area. It's called Braj Mandala. Everybody knows this. And in the center of that is Mathura. So it's like a big lotus, just like we were reading from the Brahma Samhita. So this transcendental world manifests in the material world, and Vajranabh established this treasure land where people could go and remember the different pastimes that Krishna performed. And he was a young boy. He traveled everywhere with his cows. He would go all over the place. So all these different pastimes took place in these various locations. And Vajranabh established that. And the whole society was very much aware of that. But in due course of time, what are we talking, 5,000 years ago? So as time went by, all these holy places gradually became lost. Just like we read in the story of Madhavendra Puri. What happened to Madhavendra Puri when he had a dream? Why? What happened? What was the first dream he ever had? The deity came to him and said, I was established by Vajranabh, and then the Muslims came, and the pujari stuck me in this bush in the hill, and nobody ever came back. So please excavate me. So starting with Madhavendra Puri, who excavated that deity of Gopal, installed him on the hill of Govardhan, built a temple there. So that was the seed. And now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming to Vrindavan, and he's going to instruct Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, the six Goswamis, Lokanath Bhugarbha, there was another one there, Narayan Bhatta Goswami. These different devotees re-established. They went to these various places, re-excavated the kunds, found the deities that had been lost, re-established temples, and this is what's going on with the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu aspect of that. Unfortunately, it's time now, but I'm giving class not next week, but the week after, when Lord Chaitanya finds Radhakund and Shamakund. Then there's part 2 to this. This is Krishna and his pastimes, but then there's also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his pastimes. Right now it's so bizarre. Here's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, in Vrindavan, where Krishna had performed his pastimes. And who can fathom such a manifestation? He's Krishna, but he's not Krishna. He's in a completely different mood. He's not playing his flute and enjoying with the gopis. He's in the mood of Srimati Radharani and a servant. There's a beautiful verse by Bhakti Vinod Thakur in his Sri Sri Svaniyama Dasakam. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is the personified abode of all divinely ecstatic mellow tastes. And Sri Radhika is the topmost abode of all his divinely potent energies. Indeed, she is the personified form of the highest mellow of love in separation. Within the forest of Vrinda, which is gloriously rich with the all-pervading treasure of the sweetest Madhurya Rasa, this Lord, Sri Krishna, is continuously enjoying as he makes Sri Radhika happy by his loving service rendered to her 24 hours a day. That very same Lord Krishna is exactly identical to the son of Mother Sachi, who eternally lives simultaneously, yet separately, in Gaudadesh, as the instructor of the process for rendering his own service. May that Sachinandana become my supreme master and guide, and may he always appear to me just to lead me on the proper devotional path, birth after birth after birth. I thought that was pretty wonderful. So, any questions or comments? Yeah, couple. Microphone.
I have one question.
Okay, after his.
Hare Krishna, thank you for very interesting class. I was thinking about different replicas of holy dams, like the one Bhaktisiddhanta established at Chaitanya Math or our Srila Prabhupada in New Vrindavan. And if you can explain a little bit in those replicas what brings the energy of the holy name. Is that devotee or... Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Just as Krishna is unlimited and can manifest himself anywhere, as in the deity forms, all over the world, all over the universe, anywhere, anytime. Similarly, Vrindavan, they're non-different than Krishna. Vrindavan is non-different than Krishna. Krishna's name is non-different than Krishna. Krishna's form, name, form, qualities, pastimes, it's absolute. In this world, everything is relative. So we don't experience the absolute dimension. Everything here is hot and cold, black and white, up and down. It's dual. It's duality. And we're extremely limited and conditioned by time and space. So our perception of things is kind of like looking at the world through a straw. You don't see nearly all of it. You see a little bit of it. So when a pure devotee, there are methods, just like installing a deity. When we install the deity, what's that called? Pran Pratishtha? Right? You do the ceremony and invite the Lord to personally enter into that form. There are prescriptions. By doing so, he agrees. Yes, okay, you asked me to do that. Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhakta prayachati tara ham bhakti upartam ashnami prayatatmana. I'll accept it. I agree. He agrees to reciprocate with his devotees if they approach him as he wants them to approach him. So, Srila Prabhupada, as a Saktivesha avatar, as we can easily see, spreading Krishna consciousness around the world, people on every continent are chanting Hare Krishna, taking prasadam. This didn't happen before 1965. Very, very little. So, he's being empowered by the Lord, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by Krishna, yes. you establish these things. And by establishing the deities, the form of worship, the pujas and rituals and mantras we chant, these are all like those nutrients, like the different foods that are in each group that cultivate, like we worship Tulsi. O Tulsi, beloved of Krishna, my desire is to obtain the service of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Whoever approaches you has his wishes fulfilled, and you make him a resident of Vrindavan. Like this, it's specific. Our worship of the Lord is not vague. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada can establish, or any acharya can establish a dham where these particular sentiments will be nurtured. It's also described that in the spiritual world, there are the planets, and each planet has a particular Istadev, and even those deities manifest on earth. Like Srivangam has the deity of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So there are different places, Vamanadev, or different deities, different places, and they manifest here to help nurture that. I hope that explains it. Prime?
I was curious to know that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, why didn't he put Govinda Lilamrita in the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Is it like contradicting his mood, or why write a separate book?
My understanding, according to what he has written, he writes, I'm blind, I'm lame, my body shakes, I can die at any moment, in the beginning of Madhya Lila. Yes. So he describes, I'm putting these Antya Lila Leelas now because I might not last. I might not live to be able to complete this task. Just like we see, Srila Prabhupada. He gave us summary, study only. Exact same thing. He's giving, you want to read Govinda Lilamrita? I've already written it, you read that book. And this goes back to that food chart with all the different foods. There are so many different books that you can study that nurture a particular bhav, a particular sentiment in the heart. And Govinda Lilamrita is a book in itself that doesn't need to be repeated. He's just giving indication here by sprinkling little spice from that food group and this food group. Then you can go over there and read that one and get your meal another time. Yeah.
Another point was that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur made a comment. That story you nicely narrated, I appreciate. That when Pradyumna returned, and Rukmini mother, she was cooking, busy in the kitchen, she noticed that Krishna is coming. And she is little aware that every time Krishna comes, he comes with another girl. Something like, because that's how Satyabhama came. So she's thinking, okay, because Pradyumna came, but she was very disturbed because her breast milk was pouring out. Vatsulla Ras.
Achha.
Vatsulla Ras, there is 8 sattvic mood, every rasa, but Vatsulla Ras has 9. They have an affection, the breast milk comes for the child. Mother Joshoda naturally comes.
Sweet.
So she was disturbed. Why my breast milk is coming and seeing Krishna coming? This is not proper. But then later on when Pradyumna paid obeisances, then she realized, oh
nice.
That's my son. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, because Pradyumna was 16 years old, exactly. So Krishna is eternally 16 years. So he gave him many references. This is one of the references. He said, why Krishna is eternally always looks 16 years. He never grown up. Nava Jovan, growing.
Yes. Thank you. Wow, sweet. Jai, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.